Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet, Jazz Hands. And I've got no rhythm. I want to wrap up my week for you with Friday reads. I have my tea here, which I'm going to sip from. I have my phone here because I'm watching the cricket live. England are playing the West Indies. England are 186 for 9 as of recording, so it's Thursday night my time. Now the clocks are going forward here in Israel tonight, so I'm going to lose an hour's sleep, which is painful because I still got to get up in the morning Friday. My work week is finished. I don't work Fridays, but I've got to get up in the morning Friday morning. My wife is working tomorrow, and I have to go to the supermarket first thing, so that's going to be rough, losing an hour's sleep. It's still absolutely bitterly cold here in Israel, the coldest March in memory. And so I've got a blanket on, I'm on the couch, and I'm told that next week suddenly is going to be up in the 80s. But we've had a really, really bitter early spring here, unseasonably and unusually cold. And my mum keeps texting me from London to tell me that it's warmer where she is than it is where I am, and she's absolutely thrilled with that. And hopefully so I'm just checking the grid. Hopefully she'll be with us in about a month from now. She's coming during Passover, and she'll stay for a month, so that's something to look forward to as well. Though I haven't ordered any books for her to bring, because I'm still reading all the books that I bought over the last year. Okay, what else do I want to say? Yes, I wanted to give a shout out to Max and Avital. I put them in that order because Max is the one that asked me for it, so normally I would say Avital and Max. Friends of ours in New York, who he found my channel and said, how come I haven't given him a shout out? So hi Max, hi Avital. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, there's been, since my brother came on and did an episode with me, and I promise I'll get him back because he's clearly a big draw. Word has got out a little bit, so my family seem now to have found out that I do this. My mum has told me that she likes to put me up on the big screen in the background, probably with the sound down, just to imagine that I'm there with her. And our friends who we stayed with in New York and visited them in Connecticut texted me to say that his sister in Australia was watching BookTube and recognised me. He said, "Wait, isn't that your friend? He's on the thing, and he's in that bookshop that you work at in Connecticut." And she hadn't quite made the connection that they were next to me when I was filming it. Anyway, whole thing. So, hi Eleanor in Australia. Hope you're well as well. Yes, it is me. That's enough shout outs. Okay, on to my. Oh yeah, last shout out. Thank you to everybody who's done the Skip to My Lou tag this week. It's been a lot of fun watching people take it in the spirit in which it was offered. I was a little concerned at the last minute that some people might just find the whole thing a bit too. Moving the furniture upstairs, a little too icky, but people seem to have taken it in the spirit it was meant, and we've seen inside a whole bunch of people's loos, so thank you, and I hope more people will take up the challenge and skip to their loo. Okay, this is where we are this week. Parakeet, this is what I'd started when last week, and I finished it over the weekend. This is by Marie-Helene Bertino, and I read her first book, which was called, I think it's her first novel. I think she's done some short stories called 2 a.m. The Cat's Pajamas, which I really, really loved. And I heard her being interviewed on the So Many Damn Books podcast. And so I was excited to pick this up, and I waited while it wasn't first pick. I waited till I could find it cheap. And this was a second. This was from the West Tisbury Public Library, if anyone knows where West Tisbury is. Depressingly, I don't think it was ever taken out. I'm guessing that date up there is the date it was brought into the library, July 20. Anyway, so I bought this. I don't think it had ever been read. I don't think it had ever been borrowed. It had been purchased by the library. It's got this lovely covering on it. Anyway, I picked it up cheap. 1 second, I have some tea. And I didn't love it. Mark Nash gave this a 5-star review when he read it closer to when it came out. And then last week when I said that I was reading it, he commented that it sort of faded in his memory a little bit. Not the book has faded, but diminished in his memory since the time he read it. Yeah, for me this wasn't a 5-star read. It was okay, and it was interesting, and it was there was a lot going on. So the parakeet sort of appears early on. It's a story of a bride about to get married, and she's staying in the hotel they're going to be staying in, having the wedding in, and she's visited by a parakeet who she immediately senses is her late grandmother come to visit her. And give her some important information that she needs to find her brother, but she won't. She needs to look for her brother, but she won't find him. And then proceeds to shit all over her wedding dress, which is a great start to a novel. And I don't think it ever really fulfills that early promise. There's some weird dream stuff. There's some really sort of fine, sort of inclusive storytelling and about families and disparaging mothers and sibling relationships, and there's good stuff in there, and I don't think it ever really came together. But it's short and it's sweet and it's well written. But I say the 2 a.m. in the Cat's Pajamas I really love and I really recommend, and this was okay. Parakeet by Marie-Helene Bertino. After that, I'm still going through all the graphic novels I bought, and so here's a couple of ones. This is one I picked up last summer. This is Civil War. That was written by Mark Miller, and this is drawn by Steve McNiven. So this was this is an archetypal Marvel crossover event. So you may know Civil War because that was they used the title and some of the themes of this in that second Captain America movie, which is called Captain America Civil War. And this is where that came from. It was a big summer crossover event. What does that mean? It's a marketing tool that these big comic companies put out where they try and make you buy lots of comics that you wouldn't normally buy. So, for example, you may be somebody who reads Iron Man every month, and then you may read something from that's a Marvel comic. You may read something else. You may read Batman. And the way, if the only comic you read is Iron Man, they try and get you to buy lots of other comics by making Iron Man appear in all sorts of comics across the whole story. So this was Civil War, was published as a 7-issue miniseries, and that's what's captured here. Civil War, we're telling the story about a Civil War, which those of you who don't know, I'll tell you in a second. And then what they do is they publish loads of peripheral stories. There's Fantastic Four Civil War, there's Iron Man Civil War, the 4 issues of that, and 4 issues of that, and then X-Men Civil War, and then there's along with this one-off series Civil War, there was another one, Frontline, which was how the newspapers reported Civil War, and that's his own 7-issue miniseries. And then I think with Civil War it was something like 100 different issues if you wanted everything to do with Civil War. So this miniseries, this is 7 issues, and each one will be published 1 month. So issue 1 of Civil War will be published, and then all that month you get part 1 of that story and part 1 of that story and part 1. So, and theoretically you could read them all. If you want to know the entire Civil War story, you need to read all 100 issues, but no one ever does that. You just pick and choose the ones you want. But this is the core 7-part miniseries that forms the actual core of Civil War. So all the major events happen here, including the instigating event of the Civil War, which was as follows. There's a young superhero group. They're called the New Warriors, and they were always a little sort of tier 3. After the Avengers and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, the New Warriors are always a sort of no big deal of a team. And they're going after a bunch of sort of, again, third-tier villains, except it's all being filmed. It's like a reality TV series. That's how this third-tier team, the New Warriors, are funding themselves or getting their name out there and doing this thing. They're being followed around by cameras, like a Dog the Bounty Hunter kind of thing. And they're going up against these third-tier villains, except one of them seems to have the power, a nasty fellow called Nitro, who can blow himself up and do lots of damage. And when they approach him, they're not prepared, and he explodes and takes out several blocks and kills hundreds and hundreds of people, including a school and children. So this is the instigating event of the Civil War, in the way that in the MCU, in the cinematic universe, what they used was the second Avengers movie, I think Age of Ultron, where there was this whole problem in Sokovia, where the whole city gets lifted up and smashed and beaten up, and the Avengers are blamed for all these terrible things that happen there, and so superheroes start to be regulated. So here it's this thing where hundreds of innocents are killed by a baddie except a baddie that was attacked by a superhero team, and therefore they decide that superheroes need to be regulated. And the split. The split is the same as if you've seen the movie. You've got Captain America leading the rebels, who don't want to be regulated and don't think the government should have oversight over superheroes, and you have Iron Man, and in this instance also Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four, these great visionaries who decide that the way forward is that superheroes have to police themselves and have to be registered and have to be qualified and policed, blah blah blah. It's a great premise for a story. Mark Miller, who I read that book a couple of weeks ago of him, which I really hated, and this is good storytelling. It's a great premise. I don't think it necessarily follows through, but there's some powerful stuff in here. As it says, Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four is pro-registration, and it turns out his wife, Sue, who is the Invisible Woman, is anti-registration, and it splits a family. So in the macro of the superhero world, you have the microcosm of this family, this one first family of the Marvel world, who are split down the middle. And then you get Captain America. And now, to me, they make a good attempt at showing both sides, but it seems like everyone, maybe this is just maybe in my politics, everyone would be on Captain America's side. The government shouldn't be in control of superheroes. So my sympathies were always with him. But it's good storytelling. The artwork here is fantastic. There's some crazy stuff in it. So there's things that were going on at the time that I don't really remember. So there's a whole thing where there's a clone of Thor's, because Thor is not around at the time, or Ragnarok has happened, so all the Norse gods have died, but of course gods don't ever die. So but at this time, Thor is replaced with a clone, and terrible things ensue. There's also this fantastic moment, which has repercussions, and we've seen in the movies and in this, where Spider-Man originally sides with Iron Man, and so to prove his willingness to register, he registers under the superhero accords or whatever it is, and reveals his identity. And reveals to the world that he is Peter Parker and has been Spider-Man since he was 15 years old, at which point J. Jonah Jameson faints, of course. So we've seen that play out in the movie as well, with no connection to the Civil War. But the whole thing we've just seen in the last Spider-Man movie, where he tries to get the world to forget that he's Peter Parker, and in return for doing so, his relationship with MJ is lost as well, and that's taken directly from the bargain that Peter Parker, Spider-Man, eventually makes following this. So a lot of what we see here has played out and been seen by millions on the big screen. And this is was a good way to revisit. I think I read some of these issues when they first came out. I wasn't collecting comics anymore, but I think I read them online. And I like the artwork. I like Steve McNiven's artwork, and this is a good story if you want to get back to this. Also, I don't think you need to read all 130 odd issues. These 7, I think, cover the whole story, and it's quite a good story, and I think it certainly holds up better than some of the other huge Summit crossover events that Marvel has run since then, which I'm not really up to date with. So after this, you've got the whole sort of Age of Ultron and Onslaught and all those things, which I'm not really up to date with. But Civil War was a good one. More tea, 1 second. And after that, I read some more graphic novels, because I've been slowly collecting this. This is Judge Dredd, The Complete Case Files, Volume 4. And I've got volumes 1, 2, 3, although I didn't buy them in that order. I think I found 2 first, then 3, then went back and bought 1. But now I'm going to try and pick them up one by one. Now, these are reprints of the original Judge Dredd comics, Judge Dredd strip, as it appeared in 2000 AD comics. Which was first published in sort of 1979, so right in my wheelhouse. Now, I'm 10 years old in 1979, and I was reading sort of Beano and Dandy and Wizard and Chips and those kind of comics, and 2000 AD was a bit too grown up for me. Even though I love science fiction, I just found it a bit scary, and so I never got into it, even though it's a weekly comic, it would have been right in my wheelhouse, but it just felt a little scary. There was particularly those stories in the very early issues of Judge Dredd with his brother. I don't know if I've spoken about this before. When his brother Rico comes back, and there's a reveal Rico was a bad judge and got sent off to work on a moon of Titan or something like that. Anyway, and his whole face has been sewn up so he can work in zero atmosphere. And there's a reveal of all the things that were done to him in order to make him work out on this penal colony on outside in some other planet, and terrifying. A friend of mine had that comic and showed it to me. It was terrifying. Anyway, I now have the reprint of those issues, and it's still a terrifying thing. This is a bit further on. So this is, I'll tell you exactly. So this is 2000 AD issues 156 to 207. On only the Judge Dredd parts. This doesn't, 2000 AD, it continues to be an anthology comic. So in every issue of the comic, there are 3 or 4 stories going on. And Judge Dredd usually appears in most of them. Occasionally takes some time off, but there's often a Judge Dredd story in like 3 or 4 pages of a Judge Dredd story that can play out. Either it could be a standalone, just those 3 or 4 pages, you've got the whole start and end of the story, or it can play out over several weeks. So this is 156 to 207. That's a year's worth, more than a year's, 52 weeks in a year. That's more than a year's worth of 2000 AD comics. This is just the Judge Dredd part. That's why it's such a thick, hefty volume. It's from, I would say, 1980 to 81, around then. That's when we're talking. So I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. It's all black and white reprints. And there's Judge Dredd. This is the first story here, which ran for about half a year in 2000. So that's 3 or 4 pages every week for about half a year. And the story is called The Judge Child. And there's a prophecy that a child born with the Eagle of Justice mark is going to be the one that saves Earth. And so they track down this child who has this strange, let me see if I can get you a picture of it, this strange tattoo on his forehead. That's the eagle. You can just about see a birthmark. And this is Owen Chrysler. He is prophesied to be the Judge Child, and he will bring balance to the force, or whatever, as the way these prophecies usually work. And Judge Dredd is charged with finding the Judge Child and bringing him back, because no one seems to know where he is. And it goes off on a whole intergalactic trip. He has a small team that go with him on this intergalactic spacecraft, and they go from planet to planet trying to track down where the Judge Child has last been seen, in order to bring him back. So on the one hand, how fantastic it must have been to be buying this comic every single week and only be getting tiny little part of the story, and it goes off on tangents, and they get trapped in something. In order to get information of which planet, who's kidnapped him and taken him to another planet, they need to get this information. It's a really involved, fantastic bit of space opera with a really bleak ending, which, this is 40 years since this was first published and still has a bit of a kick to it. Dredd always sits on the line between sort of satire and stuff. He's supposed to be this sort of jackbooted fascist policeman on the one hand. That was his origins. It was a satire of police brutality and fascism. But he becomes a sympathetic figure, even as his temperament doesn't change, and he still deals with things very harshly. But there's some genuine pathos in some of these stories, as well as the silly stuff, and as well as the sort of aliens and the baddies, and there's some really fine work done. A lot of this was written by a chap called John Wagner, and it's penned under a pen name. I think they say John Howard. I think it's always a script robot. John Howard, art robot. Brian Bolland. So Brian Bolland of The Killing Joke does a lot of the artwork in here, and some other artists who became famous doing work for Marvel and DC later on. Some really fine pencil work, and a lot of this is in black and white. Later on we get Dredd in colour, but in these early years, 80-81, this was in 2000, it was printed on old sort of newsprint, and it was rough. But there's some good stuff. This is a big meaty volume. These get published. They're still publishing, by the way. They're up to about volume 40, 50, and they're not up to date. Judge Dredd, the 2000 AD is still coming out weekly in print. I think the readership is smaller than it was, but I think there's a loyal enough readers to keep publishing it. And they're putting out these reprints still to this day. I don't know where they're up to, but this is volume 4, and they've done about 40 of these. Rebellion is the name of the publishing company that is putting them together. And new, they go for like 15, 16, 17 quid a time, and I'm trying to pick them up for much less than this. So I paid, I think, sort of £7, £8, and maybe £9 for each of these on average. I wouldn't want to pay. I'm not going to pay £16 for 40 volumes. That's cheapest. That would be a lot of money to have all these done up. But I love the idea. I'm not in a rush. And collecting these and having them on the shelves. I think in years to come, if I can still find them and try and pick them up cheaply for under a tenner each time, I may carry on reading that. So that is Judge Dredd, The Complete Case Files, Volume 4. After that, I went back to another series that I'm doing. This is Janet Evanovich, 10 big ones. So this is the 10th in the Stephanie Plum series. I have one more of these already, like I've got number 11, but I may be coming to the end. I've enjoyed these so much. They've been absolute riot, and still moments in this that make me laugh out loud, but I may have come to the end of my buying of these. I think I'll read 11 in the next 6 months or so, and then, unless that's a return to form and something original, because we're getting very samey. There's a love triangle at the center of this, which never really interested me, and she's really hitting it heavy on this, and I'm starting to tire of it all. And the things that show up in like Stephanie's car always gets blown up somehow, and every single book. It's a running joke, and I get that it's a running joke, but it's a little tiresome after all. And the dithering between whether she wants to be with Morelli, who is her childhood boyfriend, or with Ranger, who is a sort of tough and rough, secretive, also works as a bounty hunter. So I like this. There's still plenty of fun to be had here, but I may be coming to the end of my time with this series. I've got one more after this. I haven't bought 12, and I don't know if I will. And that's it. And then I started reading, and this is what I'll be reading this weekend, Hello Book by Jason Mott, which won one of the awards last year. And looking forward to digging into this. This is blurbed on the back by Charles Youth, who wrote Interior Chinatown, and other people who I don't know, Keezy Lehman, who I've never read, Abby Daré, is that the girl with the louding voice, which I didn't read, and a chap called Imran Mahmood, who I don't know at all. Anyway, I read 10 pages of this, really looking forward to digging into the rest of it. Hell of a book by Jason Mott, and that is a lot. I spoke a lot about comics, so probably not of interest to everybody. Sorry about that. Have a great weekend. Bye.